Hello and welcome to another episode of It Could Only Happen on Earth, the show where we look at all kinds of bizarre, outlandish, and thought provoking news stories from around the world. I'm Marcus Lowth, and joining me as does every week is my good friend and co host, Paul Seaburn. Paul, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, Marcus. Thank you for that introduction, and I hope you're doing well as well. The nice day here in Cleveland, Ohio, and as you said, we've got some wonderful, unusual, and thought-provoking. I like that. I hope they provoke some thought, but also some fun stories. So let's get right to it. Go ahead.
Well, yeah, I'm going to throw it straight back to you, Paul, actually. So,
Oh, that's right.
Bigfoot musicals. This is a strange story. What we got on this? Because this is fascinating.
Oh, yeah. We talk about we talked before about the normalization or the gentrification, as I call it, of cryptid monsters in particular. But so this is probably the best example of mainstreaming Bigfoot that I have ever seen. Um, there's a musical on it's off Broadway right now, which means that it plays in smaller theaters in New York City. But it's still a big deal. It's a big deal to be anywhere on Broadway. The musical, the plot centers around a corrupt mayor, a gullible townspeople, and a kind-hearted Bigfoot who just wants to belong. That's from the playbill of it. So it's called Bigfoot the Musical, original production, co-written by comedian and TV writer Amber Ruffin. Amber Ruffin is her claim to fame came from the Late Show with Seth Meyers. She is one of the writers, one of the performers. She now has her own show. She has a political humor show as well, and she's written what sounds to me to be a funny musical. Uh, starting with a corrupt politician and gullible people. Gee, where have we heard that before? Uh, so this was interesting because I mentioned the politics because there is some politics behind the musical. Ruffin, in an interview, said that while she was writing it, she saw Sasquatch as an other. Uh, she said during various times during the writing the musical, she saw Bigfoot as a black woman, as a trans person, as a LGBTQ person, and also as an immigrant. So all definitely others in our current culture. But this seems ironic, Marcus, because to think of Bigfoot as an other, if you believe in Bigfoot, you should know that um, the general consensus would be that Bigfoot was here before human beings came to North America. So Bigfoot's not the other; we're the other. So the musical should be about us being the others and Bigfoot being the protagonist, maybe, I guess. I don't know. So there's definitely a political undertone to this musical. But you can't keep politics out of anything anymore. So uh, and Bigfoot, of all the creatures, of all the cryptids, uh, I think has been depicted more in movies and television than any other creature, any other paranormal or cryptid creature that I can think of. Uh, and generally as friendly. I think
Mm.
I did a little research just leading up to the musical. The most famous depiction of Bigfoot is the movie Harry and the Hendersons.
Yeah.
Everybody's seen Harry and the Hendersons. A simple story: family adopts Bigfoot, and mayhem ensues. It actually won an Oscar. I didn't realize this
I
part.
didn't know.
For best makeup at the 60th Academy Awards. So that was like at least 20 some years ago, maybe 30 years ago. Uh, and it inspired a television spin-off of the same name. There was also a movie more recently in 2024 called Sasquatch Sunset. And I do remember writing about this. They called it an absurdist fantasy drama that covers all the bases there, just about. They need murder. If you put murder in there, I think that would cover all the bases. But you may remember this. It followed a family of four Sasquatch, a mother, a father, and two children, over a period of 1 year. So it was almost like a documentary about a Bigfoot family. premiered at the 2024 Sundance Film Festival. So had a big premiere, best known for two things. Number one, it starred Riley Keough as the mother Bigfoot in costume, of course. If you don't know who Riley Keough is the granddaughter of Elvis Presley. Wow. So yeah, so a little bit of Nepo stuff going on there. But the biggest reason why people remember it is because it's the first depiction on the big screen of Bigfoot having sex.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. That alone has Marcus getting ready to look it up as soon as this show.
I'll get back to that in a minute. I'll tell you exactly what I was thinking.
So there's also Bigfoot. There's a movie called Bigfoot from 1970, independent, low-budget science fiction, but starred John Carradine of the famous Carradine family, very well-known, well-respected dramatic and horror actor. It was a campy film, obviously. They tried to convert Sasquatch into an old-fashioned movie monster, kind of more of a Godzilla kind of thing. But the most normalized, more gentrification again, for kids, in 2017, there was an animated Bigfoot movie called Son of Bigfoot. Family movie, that's the way they described it. And then my favorite, another absurdist movie. This was in 2018. You remember this one. It was called The Man Who Killed Hitler and Then the Bigfoot. It starred Sam Elliott, another big time actor. The character he played was famous for attempting to kill Hitler back during World War II, and the attempt failed. And it ate at him throughout his lifetime. And reached the end of his life, and he decides he's going to go kill Bigfoot because the rumor was that a Bigfoot caused a virus that was making people in the town ill or possibly killing them. I don't remember the famous, well-known, good big stars. My favorite depiction of Bigfoot, though, and you may have seen this, it's not a movie, but it's a person who goes by the name of Sasquatch. Right. Sasquatch is a guy in a Bigfoot costume. His name is Dean Mitchell, and he does Bigfoot playing the saxophone, doing covers of well-known, really good rock jazz music. He's an excellent musician, let alone a good Bigfoot impersonator. He's been doing this since 2019. He has a huge social media, but Marcus, if we could get 1% of his social media following, we'd be doing well. My favorite, as Bigfoot playing the saxophone, he does a cover of Hall & Oates' Man Eater. Perfect song for Bigfoot. So we've talked about this before. There's serious Bigfoot researchers in this country, as well as in the UK, because of the more sightings that you guys are having as well. Yeah. Are they offended by this, or should they welcome these kinds of things because it brings more people into the awareness of Bigfoot and Sasquatch and maybe other cryptids that, Wolfman or something like that, Dogman. Maybe they'd be able to raise more money for their research if more people were interested in it. I've always said, as far as Bigfoot is concerned, I am interested in anything that gives people a community, that gives people a reason to go outside and do something interesting, healthy, and fun. So to me, that's a good reason to go looking for Bigfoot.
Yeah, no, I'd second that. Like I said, I agree completely. The more people that are interested in it, even if it's just in a fun way, the more chances are that they will develop that interest into a more serious interest. Now you say, the more people that are speaking about any given subject, it's got to be a good thing. So, and what I was thinking of, like you say, the Hendersons film and TV series. I remember watching that myself. I enjoyed the TV series more than the film. I seem to remember. I don't know why, but yeah, and it is interesting. Again, it's similar to the Alf series where he's depicted as, you know, like really big but still very friendly, like a clumsy giant almost. But
Right.
what I was thinking when you were talking about the film that had the Bigfoot having sex, it reminded me of the late great Bill Hicks, and he was talking about before he died. Obviously, he was talking about how he'd developed films, movie scripts, plots, and he'd got into meetings with Hollywood people, you know, and really detailed all his character development, everything that you would expect to be involved in a professional script. And he said, you know, after listening to all this, the guy just turned around to him and said, basically, you got any sex in it? And that's all he was interested in. And that's kind of that was what popped into my mind when you said that, thinking Billick somewhere is rolling around in his graves. I told you, I told you. But no, it's got to be a good thing. Got to be a good thing that we've got, you know, not just, I don't actually think, I can't actually, not off the top of my head, I can't think of a serious film. You know, like a group of kids go out into the wilderness camping and there's a Bigfoot stalking them. I can't think of anything. There might be, and obviously viewers let me know. But I mean, they are normally depicted as friendly, as cuddly giants, and but ultimately, yeah, I think it's a good thing. I think we need to see more of this because it just gets the subject out to people. I
Yeah.
think people, and I think the Bigfoot has probably got the biggest. I was speaking to my wife about this actually a few days ago. Of all the stuff that we speak about, and I mean, we as in researchers into the paranormal, UFOs, aliens, cryptid, Bigfoot is the one that I suspect most people would get their heads around being real. You know, some people say aliens, nah, not listening to that. Ghosts, well,
Yeah.
but Bigfoot, yeah, there's a legitimate possibility in
Yeah.
many people's minds. So, yeah, it's got to be a good thing. I think it's great there's a musical about this. I think we need more TV shows, actually. I think we need to revamp the Hendersons and bring that back.
Yeah, I think if there's anything that harms Bigfoot, in my mind, it's the overabundance of Bigfoot hunting
Yeah.
television shows that we have. Because the first thing everyone says is, well, they haven't found Bigfoot because they want to have another season or another two season. Unfortunately, to me, I think that would hurt the credibility of Bigfoot research more than any Bigfoot musical would. So I agree with you. And speaking of musicals, I think you've got a musical story coming up next. Great
Yeah,
segue.
this is fascinating. So, you know, I'm not sure whether Bigfoot are using music as a form of therapy, but humans should be. There's a lot of research on this, and it's been ongoing for years. So I'm going to be consulting my notes because I'm going to be delivering some facts as we go through this. Now, basically, the benefits to listening and playing music are not just mental, according to research. They can actually be physical as well. So, for example, I mean, one researcher was saying that humans are almost hardwired to sing and to even to dance and to play instruments, and it's possibly part of our evolution. And what he was saying is, you know, that chanting, for example, goes back thousands and thousands of years, and chanting, according to some mystics and shamans, unleashes consciousness. And like we spoke about before, you know, even without hallucinogens, you can, through chanting and concentration, some people believe that you can enter another realm of consciousness at least. But as I say, it's not just the mental aspects of this and the benefits to mental health. Singing out loud, for example, it strengthens the lungs and the diaphragm, and this increases the amount of oxygen that's in the blood. And so this can help to reduce blood pressure. It can help with heart disease and cardiovascular disease. And vocalizing, and again, I don't quite understand the science behind it, but it can improve your immune system. It can boost your antibodies. So just sit, you know, having a sing out loud, whether it's in the shower, in the kitchen, wherever you want to do it, it could be really good for you, not just for mental health, but physically. Studies have even shown that singing out loud can lower cortisol, which is a primary stress hormone, and that can also have an effect with cancers and neurological disorders. So, I mean, again, we're not saying singing out loud is going to cure cancer because before someone jumps on that, but you've got nothing to lose by doing this stuff. Singing out loud does help. And as I say, it's been something that's been with humanity for thousands of years. I mean, there's been like little flutes made out of bones that are 20, 40,000 years old. So this is, we're going back right into Neanderthal times. And so, you know, this has been with us for a while. Now, not just singing out loud, though, some research also suggests that listening to music regularly. It doesn't specify how long you need to listen to this each day, but certainly as you get older, when you get after 70, if you listen to music regularly, it reduces the risk, according to some research, of developing dementia, possibly slowing dementia down. It's essentially, it's just because it rewires the brain. it makes you think of think of things differently because you've got this input coming in all the time. I mean, I play an instrument, but I remember speaking to somebody saying that I can no longer listen to music in the way I could when I was 6, 7, 8 years old. I hear it differently now because I can hear how it's being mixed. I can hear, if anything, I almost see music. You hear a sound, and I've got a visual representation of what that sound is. But I would
Uh-huh.
imagine this is going on subconsciously in anyone's mind. And I think, again, there's some research to suggest that if you've not played an instrument your entire life, if you start learning guitar or piano in your 70s, again, it's good for your brain, it's good for new input, and it could slow down dementia. So essentially, what we've got here then is music, something which has been with us for thousands of years, which we have utilized for thousands of years to get into different realms, different ways of thinking. It could actually be very physically beneficial. So I find that fascinating. And again, we seem to have spoken about music a lot, even though we're only like 4 weeks in. It is a big part of human existence, I think, more so than people actually think.
Oh, most definitely, Marcus. I think I mentioned when we first started doing the show. I like that you have guitars in the back of your office. I play the accordion, so I can't really hang one back here. It
Right.
wouldn't look the same. But what a great topic, not just for the fact that we're all concerned about dementia and losing our memory and slowing down the aging process, which I very fascinating there, and I agree with the scientific research there. But from my own experience as well, I always feel better when I listen to music. Uh, it's it's healthy. It's
Mm.
like laughing. Those are, we always talk about laughter being the best medicine. But really, if music goes back that far in our culture, it's probably even better than laughter. Uh, but there's a big concern, and it's among many of my friends as well as I think the general culture in the States and maybe around the world, but particularly here. When we were growing up, we one of the classes that we took was music. We going all the way back to you talking about being 6 or 7 or 8 years old, I can remember the teacher, the nun that we had, gave every student some sort of musical instrument. Might have been a little drum, might have been one of those slide flutes, might have been two sticks to beat together, and somehow I don't know how she did it. She got us to play songs that didn't sound terrible, at least not to us at 7 or 8 years old. Uh, we don't do that anymore because
Mm.
there's no money for it. And I
Yeah.
don't want to get into the politics of all that, but it's terrible because if what you say is true, that it's part of our DNA,
Mm.
we're we are uh, starting our children off on the wrong foot by messing with that DNA and possibly leading them towards dementia, towards depression, towards all those things that we're going to try and resolve in our future with pharmaceuticals. Why not resolve them with music, and why not start early on and use it as a therapy, as a protection against those things happening. I'm glad that this is a perfect. But while it doesn't sound paranormal, yet it really is
Yeah.
because of the consciousness aspect of it, the and the history. Again, going back, obviously, that's what we find. That's what we find in caves, the oldest caves where people, humans and human ancestors have been. It's almost like a dividing line. Oh, this culture must be civilized because look, they took human bones and they put holes in it and made a flute out of it. Uh, so yeah, great topic, great subject. I like that.
Yeah, I think you're right. As I say, I think it very much is paranormal. Depending on perspective, but I think we've spoke before about how there's a number of paranormal researchers, whether they're researching UFOs or Bigfoot, and they've got at least, at the very least, an intense liking for music. Now, I know that can be spread out across many different fields of interest, but I do find it interesting that that creative side, as I say, seems to show up. You've got to have a certain amount of creativity to study this stuff in the first place because a lot of it
Yeah.
is, well, it's just guesswork and theorizing. So yeah, I do think it's paranormal, and I agree with you completely. I think we should be getting kids in the same way that you get kids into sports. Now, not everyone's going to stick with it. I mean, I'm not athletic, for example. I might watch sport, but I'm just not a sporty person. So, but I obviously was a musical person. But the old adage of keep them off the streets, keep them out of trouble. If you're a part of a sports team, if you end up in a band, for example, or even if you end up at a
Uh,
school choir, it gives you something, and you carry that forward as you get older, something to keep you out of bother. But as well as teaching music, yeah, I think you're right. I think we should be teaching why music is so important to humanity and stuff. We were the same. We were taught music, to a young age, and then if you wanted to take it further, you could do. But other than that, you just would, it was gone. It was not part of your education. So
yeah.
it'll be interesting to see, where this research goes, whether we're going to see this rolled out in an official way. But I think it's certainly something that science needs to continue on with because I think it'll take us. Who knows? I'm not saying we're going to get a cure for dementia, but if we can slow that down, that's got to be a good thing.
Definitely. And I like that it's part of our DNA, that rather than brought to us by aliens.
Yeah, yeah.
Music is something that was developed by humans. It is the most human thing we can be doing, in that sense. So yeah. Let's hope that becomes one of the ways that we improve ourselves in the future.
I think you're right there. I think the music is very much a human construct.
Yeah.
But however, speaking about UFOs and aliens, Paul, I believe you've got a story of somebody spying on a UFO in South Korea, somebody quite famous as well. So what's all this about, Paul?
Okay. So if you have somebody to name a psychic, more often than not, in modern times, they'll mention Uri Geller. Uri Geller is probably the most famous psychic in the world today, and it shows the power of one television show in particular. He was on the Tonight Show with Johnny Carson, so that was back in the 1970s. That was his first major appearance to a mass audience, and even 40 years later. I was just reading a book about Johnny Carson a few nights ago, and it talks about that appearance. So people are still talking about Uri's appearance. We'll talk about it. It wasn't necessarily a good appearance, but yet it brought him to the attention of a lot of powerful people. So, so Uri is I don't know if he's a master of the psychic abilities. He was a magician, but he's definitely a master of public relations because he gets himself in the news. Uh, we have talked on another show about President Obama and his claim that aliens exist, which has since been modified. But anyways, Uri decided that he was going to weigh in on that as well. So he says that while the President Obama said that there was a UFO did not crash at Area 51. So Geller immediately gets on social media and says, "Oh, contraire, and the UFO did crash at Area 51. It injured and disfigured the aliens. They were taken from the site, and they're not at Area 51." So he agreed with that, but they were taken to Goddard Space Flight Center in Greenbelt, Maryland, just very close, 6 miles away from Washington, D.C. So at that distance, you would think that whoever was in the White House at that time would know something about it. So he's made claims like this before, many claims like this before. Uh, but he was the other thing he wanted to talk about. He used the Obama story as an excuse to reveal something that he said he's been hiding for 50 years. He said 50 years ago, Geller, made a trip to South Korea on an American military mission and even posted a picture of him with soldiers standing around him. And he says, "I've been told many times not to talk about this thing in Korea. I don't care anymore." So why did they take him there? What is it that he was hiding? He says, I quote, "The American Army flew me undercover to look for tunnels, but that wasn't the main reason. The main reason was there was a huge UFO on the ground there, so large that the military in South Korea, probably the largest ground force in the world, could not move this UFO. So instead, they built a building around it using building materials that protected the outside from the forces that they were afraid might be coming from this UFO. He called it absorbing the cosmic forces. He claimed that while he was there, he was told, these tunnels that he referred to, there really were tunnels, and some of them were dug by North Koreans trying to get to the UFO in South Korea. What they wanted to do, who knows? Steal it, get the technology. There were nefarious reasons why they would do something like that. So he provided a photo. That's it. That's it. And he said he was told not to talk about it for 50 years. Now he's going to talk about it because he doesn't care anymore, I guess. So can we believe him? That's my question. And the answer is, I don't know if we've ever believed him. That's part of the problem with Uri Geller. He's a very good magician. He's a mentalist, okay, which is also a magic art. But he's very good at promoting himself. He's one of the things that he promotes about himself that we wanted him to demonstrate is psychokinesis and telepathy. Okay, he's talked about that. He's able to do that. So he claimed that that's how he got on the Tonight Show. He was interviewed by Johnny Carson, and ahead of time he said he was going to demonstrate telekinesis. He was going to read cards that were hidden in an envelope, and he had never seen them before. Problem is, Johnny Carson was also a magician, and so he set this thing up so that there was no way, and he knew that the tricks that mentalists use, there was no way Geller could see the cards beforehand, have a stooge implanted somewhere that could see the card, feed him the information. And it was famous because Geller immediately started sweating because none of his tricks were working. And Carson felt bad then, and he apologized and explained it to him. But he said, you said you could do it. You said you have real psychic abilities. Sorry. But that wasn't enough to keep the government, the CIA, from pulling Geller and other people who claimed they were psychics into a program called the Stargate Project, which was a very famous project in 1973, teamed with Stanford Research Institute, now SRI International. These were parapsychologists, that's what they called themselves, and the CIA brought them in to test their abilities in hopes that they could use them in fighting the Cold War. They tested Geller, and the conclusion, this was according to CIA documents, that they thought that he had proven telekinesis successfully enough that they were going to consider him for further experiments. So did he? I don't know. There's very, very much still a wall of secrecy around the Stargate project. We're still learning things about that we didn't know before. And again, Geller has been proven wrong by other magicians. The amazing Randy made a career out of proving Geller wrong. So he's the kind of guy that gives real psychics, or at least, non-magician psychics, a bad name. There may be a debate whether they have a good name or not, but regardless, he's not good for those kind of people. But we should be able to learn public relations from this guy. He's really good. So you've probably seen him before. I'm going to get some water. Go ahead.
No, I'll pick it up. You're right. I mean, Uri Geller, he's an interesting guy, and I'm going to just put a caveat right now. Everything I'm about to say for the next minute or so is speculation, because I don't want the guy coming to sue me. However, I have heard lots about Uri Geller. I mean, I know he's involved with some of the information about the UFO that John Lennon saw, and apparently passing messages from alien entities to John Lennon. I've also heard rumors that the guy had a lot of connections to the intelligence services, whether the American intelligence, Israeli intelligence, or both. And there was a few occasions in the 70s where he was picked up at airports and questioned thoroughly. It was while he was part of the Stargate project, actually. And now, at this point, I want to recommend a book called The Stargate Conspiracy. It's by Lynn Picknett and Clive Prince. Now,
Okay.
what they're detailing in there is, I won't spoil the book, but they're essentially saying that that Stargate project was aimed towards some kind of showdown at the end of the century, 1999, in front of the pyramids of Giza, something that actually got called off. And they're not sure whether that was because of their research or what. But what they were saying is a guy called Andrea Puliak, I think that's the right way to pronounce it, he worked a lot with Uri Geller. And in this book that Lynn Pickner and Clive Prince put together, and it is fascinating, they were saying that one of the things that Puliak was skilled at was being able to hide small transformers in a person's teeth. And so a lot of these people involved in the Stargate project would unbeknownst to them, undergo dental work, and it was put forward that they were placing false teeth or just a small microphone within a tooth, and then the person who would hear anything spoken into this microphone from the other side, they would hear it as if it's in their own mind. It wasn't coming to their ears; it was as if it's a voice inside. And so they were saying that a lot of these people, including Geller, were manipulated into believing that they were actually receiving transmissions from elsewhere, voices from aliens. Now, that's not to say
Yeah.
that they weren't genuinely talented, because as you say, Uri Geller's a divisive guy, but he clearly has talent in terms of, I've seen him bend spoon. Now, whether he does that, whether it's a trick, not personally, you understand, on the television, whether it's a trick or whether he can literally do it, who knows? But I think what it tells us is that there are groups of people that are looking to hijack some of this stuff for their own ends. I think Geller very much fell foul of that. I think he was taken advantage of.
Yeah.
Now, again, whether he worked for intelligence or not, I don't know. But you would think he would if the CIA were, kind of that impressed with his skills. We spoke about Ingo Swann before. I think, is it John McConical or something? McConical is another famous remote viewer and psychic, etc. So yeah, Uri Geller's very divisive. Whether we can believe what he says or not, I don't know. But I have heard, and again, we treat these claims to be a pinch of salt. I believe it's in Arizona. I want to say Clory Dam, but I'll check this. And there was meant to be a UFO crash there, the Aztec crash, I think in '48, and that report says exactly the same thing. It was so embedded in the ground and so huge that
Mhm.
rather than move it, they kind of constructed something around it and then placed it off limits. So I have heard that before. It could be some truth to that. One thing that when I read this story, one thing that I was reminded of was another case of a. This was remote viewing, but it was under the similar sort of projects that the CIA was running. This was in '88, I believe, and they had a remote view the Ark of the Covenant, or attempt to, and to try and
Wow.
locate it. And that sounds really bizarre and preposterous, but the intelligence services, they seem to have a real interest in ancient relics, whether it's the Ark of the Covenant. I know they've tried to locate the real Noah's Ark, if it exists, and where it might
Right.
be. I know people look at Mount Ararat for that. So there could be some truth to this, basically, because it sounds preposterous on the surface. But what's the best way to cover up something like that? To make it sound really bizarre and stupid, so people just dismiss it. But yeah, there could be more to this, Paul, actually.
Oh yeah, yeah. I agree. I think, magicians or people of leadership positions way back when uh, used magic as one of their ways of controlling people. So if you were a magician, you were a very skilled person. You were probably in a leadership position, maybe in a religious leadership position. Um, we've lost that distinction and maybe that honor, you might say, that magicians that spot that magicians occupied. I believe, as you said, I think Geller probably was taken advantage of. I believe the part where he said he was probably part of a project that did take him to South Korea. At that point, then, was he taken someplace to see something that was not in his uh, education? He couldn't recognize as something that might have been human made, and he was led to believe that it was a UFO. Again, no pictures, no evidence. He didn't steal anything to prove to us. But and again, not to discount psychics, because I love psychics. I know a number of people who have the ability to work with tarot cards, for example. They know how to uh, read people. and that's a skill, and I think for many people that is also a gift, that empathy, uh, that allows them to learn more about a person than you or I might be able to. So I don't discount that at all. I just don't want them to take advantage of other people, just like as you said, Geller may have been taken advantage of as well.
Yeah, definitely. I think that again, there's no solid evidence to back this up, but there's certainly claims of people that the intelligence services specifically of using people like Geller in just a situation like this, just to kind of get a gauge as to one, if he does speak, how fast the story runs, whether people
Yeah.
believe it. So once you start looking at stuff like this, Paul, I think you find that it can get really nuanced and layered and complex and not as it seems on the surface. So whether he did see a UFO in South Korea, I don't know. Jury's out on that. But was he taken there? Did he see something? Yeah, probably. Probably so, actually.
Uh, Good. Well, you've got another unusual story for us that may, I don't know. Yeah, I don't think we need remote viewing to see it. Why don't you tell us what it
No,
is?
absolutely. Now, so this has happened before. So basically, in over the last couple of days in the United Kingdom, and possibly over the next couple of months, we've been told to expect blood red rain falling from the sky.
Oh,
And that probably will affect other parts of Western Europe as well. Now, one thing we need to stress straight away, this isn't the end of the world. We're not being attacked by aliens. The reason for this is that sand from the Sahara Desert is being essentially lifted. It's being caught up in strong wind currents. It's been making its way, in the wind over the Mediterranean into Europe, and when it arrives at the UK, that sand will colour the rain and it will fall as red rain. Now, I think most people would understand that, and most people wouldn't be scared if it happened, but it did happen. This, I think it was Sri Lanka in 2009, I believe it was, and whether they were just caught off guard, whether they just didn't know it was coming, but there was quite a furor about it amongst some people anyway. Anything from being attacked with chemical weapons and it's acid rain. But one of the ones that caught my attention at the time was that some people believed this rain had an alien bacteria in it, and this was an invasion that was happening. And this
oh,
bacteria, once it hit the water supply, off it goes. And obviously, that wasn't the case. It was something very similar, essentially sand caught up in the water. But what it started making me think is that we know cloud seeding exists. For example, in China in the Olympics 2008, they used cloud seeding programs to ensure good weather. And on the other side of the coin, it's been used before when people are desperate for rain, for crops or just because they're in a drought. So we know that cloud seeding is a thing. And we're not talking about chemtrails here before people leap on that. We're talking about literal scientific methods that can evoke rain or can disperse rain clouds. So it kind of made me think, what if an enemy nation or just some mad, crazy individual managed to combine this cloud seeding with something that would terrify people? So there's blood red rain for it. We could be in a bad way, really. So, I mean, it fascinated me initially because of the headline. Then it fascinated me because of the speculation. And then when I started thinking about it, it made me think, well, this could happen at any point, and it could be manipulated to have people believe. Do you get where I'm coming from? So, yeah, I found it fascinating. I've not seen any red rain in the UK yet. Whether it happens or not, I don't know. But there's also other weather phenomena, raining fish, raining frogs, and obviously they've been swept up in hurricanes and they've been dumped elsewhere. So it just got me thinking about how we might respond as a nation in the 21st century to such bizarre weather phenomena, whether it would be the same as it was hundreds of years ago, or whether we would just approach it with a more scientific outlook. I think there'd be a bit of both, to be honest with you.
yeah, that's an interesting angle, Marcus. That the blood rain, which I'm aware of because I've done stories about the red dust in the Sahara as well, and it's a nice, easy explanation for that phenomena, and other places with dried conditions that cause clay and other kind of dust to get into the atmosphere cause similar situation. But you're right. The cloud seeding, we forget about that. That is a legitimate way, as far as I know, to cause rain to happen. Now, maybe not as much as we would like, but just like the chemtrails, if you can put something that's harmless or somewhat harmless, like jet fuel into the air, or crystals, could you disguise something nefarious in those crystals as well? I didn't even think about that. I was thinking, there's all kinds of blood stuff. Yeah, there's in Antarctica, there's a blood waterfall that happens every year that's the result of bacteria from global, I'm sure, climate change. There's blood rivers, which are sometimes natural causes. Sometimes it's pollution from a business. Uh, could a business hide their pollution by creating a distraction in order to to continue rather than cleaning up the whatever it is they're doing? I think there's something there. I'm not I'm not big on many conspiracy theories, but that's one where I could see the people in power doing things like that to fool us, to cause panic, to cause us to do things that we wouldn't normally do. Maybe maybe to buy red rain protectors. It could be a great business there. These umbrellas are guaranteed to protect you from being stained by blood rain. You and I could get into that business.
Absolutely. As I say, it comes back down to money. Again, there's money to be made. I think you're right. I think you're absolutely right. And I've not thought of that, actually. I've really not thought of that. I mean, I know I was just suggesting that people could use it for nefarious purposes. The idea that companies could hide pollution within that kind of thing, that is a very real conspiracy because it
Yeah,
happens a lot, doesn't it? That if they can get away with
yeah,
stuff, they'll get away with it.
yes.
So, yeah, that would be interesting to see whether we see this red rain materialize and going forward over the course of the next few years, whether we see companies actually use this to their own ends. It is interesting. But I mean, just changing the subject a little bit, because this is one of my most favourite folklores, urban legends. Slenderman is back, apparently. What's
He's,
this all
he's
about, Paul?
back. We can't get rid of Slenderman. I thought that we did, but he won't go away. He keeps coming back. He's like cigarette. He's long, he's thin, and he's hard to quit. That's the way I describe him. So yeah, Slenderman is back in the news, allegedly seen in England of all places
Right.
by a musician. This lady's name was Lauren Amore, and she claimed she was driving home late one night on the A69 between Barnard Castle in County Durham and Newcastle upon Tyne. I'm sure I mispronounced at least some
No,
of the
no.
words. Do you know where that is? Is
Oh,
that
yeah.
near where?
It's north of me. It's about 100 miles away from where I am.
Oh, well, we need to send you on a mission then to check this out. So she claims she's driving on A69. She had to change lanes abruptly to avoid hitting a tall, thin, dark figure with a white illuminated head. Many of those things are attributes of Slenderman. Luckily, her dash cam picked up the image of this tall, dark,
Mm.
slender man, and and you could see it moving and she had to move lanes. You can see how she moves to avoid it uh, before it turns away, and you can see it has long arms bent at an unusual angle, like a slender man might do. For those who are fans of Slender Man, um, so 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 yeah, if you're not familiar with Slender Man, and I don't know how you cannot be these days, uh, probably an urban legend, one of the most famous paranormal creations of the internet that there is. Um, Started as a meme in 2009. Um, they always depicted as very tall, very thin, unnaturally thin, and a featureless white head. So could be an alien, but that's not what they depicted. That's not the legend. And he always wears a black suit, right? I think that's what it is. He always
Yeah.
wears a black suit. He's been accused of stalking, abducting, and traumatizing people, especially children. That's where the story just exploded back in a few years ago. So there's been a lot of online fiction about him. There's been he appears in videos, he appears in video games. He appears in movies. Uh, I used to say he's creepy, and then I found out that there's this thing called creepy pasta.
Yeah.
Um, I didn't learn about that when I was a kid, but apparently, internet horror is also called creepy pasta. But this is I didn't realize this. He was really Slenderman was relatively harmless until 2014,
Yeah.
and that's when the story just spread like wildfire across the internet. A girl was stabbed nearly to death in Wisconsin, a 12-year-old girl, by two other 12-year-old girls who claimed to their parents and to the authorities that they were working under the direction of the belief that if they killed this girl, they would prove that Slender Man existed because he was driving them to do it. So this just spread across the internet. Parents are demanding, the powers that be over the internet to fix this, do something about it. Always blaming something else, not the parents who don't keep good tabs on their kids. But I'm not going to go that way because you'll say I'm a boomer, and I am a. But to me, Slender Man has now become the boogeyman of the 21st century. Um, when I grew up, my parents terrified me by the boogeyman that was under my bed or in the closet, who would come and get me if I didn't eat my dinner or something, tame like that, not murdering someone.
Yeah.
There's variations of the boogeyman all around the world, uh, but the boogeyman of those days really did the scaring. They didn't. Boogeyman rarely influenced someone to cause harm to other people. I think that's a new innovation that Slenderman really brought to the forefront. Um, so these two girls were tried as adults in 2017. They were both found not guilty by reason of insanity, committed to a secure psychiatric facility. You would think that that's the last we would hear of them, but no, because these are Slender Man girls. So they were released in 2021. So 3 years later, they almost killed a little girl. They're released with restrictions in 2021. So the one girl, psychologist studied her and said, "Oh yeah, oh she's okay. She's much better now after 3 years." What did they do to her that made her so much better? How better was she? Um, During the time that they were analyzing her, she came out as a transgender man. So she would have been in her late teens. Not to say that there's anything wrong with transgender people, but it adds a really weird twist to this Slender Man story. She goes to a group home. She has to wear an ankle monitor. And what happens? She escapes with a friend. So she gets caught. They bring her back. Do they lock her up permanently? No, she's still on conditional release. Wow, is Slender Man really having an effect on people? So Slender Man caused this moral panic. And I was trying to think of some other example of a similar panic on the internet. And there was one a few years ago. This was Momo. There was a
Oh,
big
yeah.
panic about Momo. Momo looked like a monstrous doll uh, on the body of a plucked chicken, a giant plucked chicken. And it was appearing all over the place on the internet. And it was the same kind of thing. Oh, this is a creature. It's controlling your kids. It's going to do all kind of bad things. And it turned out to be a meme from an art project that someone did in Japan. So again, blown way out of proportions. We're making urban legends take on just many more powers than they used to have. the so we can't kill Slender Man. It's been proven that it doesn't exist. It was created by a meme. But there are people who say, well, if we think about something long enough, it could manifest, and maybe all of this attention to Slender Man is bringing Slender Man to life. There's a term for what that's called. You probably know what it is. Um, so, uh, so going back to the lady in England, people are looking at studying that video. Is it Slender Man or not? And the comments are like, uh, at the very start, it's bent over and then it straightens up. The height is really odd. The glowing head is odd. So are the legs. That's Slender Man 100%. How frigging weird. So, I mean, that's the general comment. If it looks like Slender Man and it acts like Slender Man, it must be Slender Man. And it's on a dash cam. So, of course, it's real. So, we're stuck with Slender Man.
It is. It's fascinating. It's like you said. I mean, first of all, like you say, we know how Slenderman began. It was like an open call, wasn't it? Come up with your
Right.
best kind of scary photos and put a little story behind it. And don't get me wrong, those photographs, they are spooky. It looks like it comes straight out of a 1980s horror film. The backstory.
Yep.
It really is.
Yep.
Now, when I was reading about Slenderman, I got fascinated with it purely from an urban legend point of view. And I know the case you're referring to in Wisconsin, the unfortunate girl. I put an article together. It might have even been from Mysterious Universe, actually, and it was basically saying when does belief in something become real? And I wasn't necessarily talking about physically real or actually real, but to the young girl who was being attacked and being attacked in the name of Slenderman. Well, Slenderman was very real to her right then, and certainly real to the attackers.
Right.
And I know, if I remember correctly, one of the attackers kind of immediately repented almost. They realized they shouldn't have done this, obviously. But one of them kind of continued in her belief, or at least outwardly, that she was doing the work of Slenderman. Now, as we know, that's nonsense. The young girls who attacked this unfortunate other girl who did survive, fortunately enough, they obviously believed in their own minds that what they were doing was for Slenderman. Now, whether they had mental issues or whether they were struggling growing up, who knows? But in the years after that, there was kids burning down the house because Slenderman had told them to do it. There's a few cases like that. There was a case of another parent being attacked by a child, again in the name of Slenderman. So is this just a case of, like we were talking about last week with the teleportation guy? Oh, I've done something wrong, blame it on Slenderman, and they'll do that. But one account which really fascinated me was it was a writer. They were a researcher writer similar to us, and they'd been researching Slenderman. Exactly like we've just been talking about its origins. They weren't putting across that it was real. They knew it was just an urban legend. But they started getting messages on their laptop and stuff from Slenderman. Their laptop would turn on of its own accord and then switch itself off again. And so, this writer basically went through all the, is my laptop faulty, blah, blah, blah. And ultimately, they were just left befuddled by it. They just could not figure out what was going on. And then in their minds, they started to think, well, like you said, has Slenderman become real? Does the power of belief, subconscious belief, maybe, collective belief, does it make something real? Or is that reality just, in the case of the girls, it's real because you're acting out what you feel is? So, yeah, it fascinates me for all those reasons. And I'm not a psychologist, but I'm sure a psychologist could put that across much better than I've just done, but essentially say the same thing. So, yeah, Slenderman, I don't know if it's going to go away. I think you're absolutely bang on. It's the 21st century of the boogeyman. Yeah, it'd be interesting to see where this stuff goes because I wouldn't say there's people out there who believe he's real, but I'd also say there's people out there that don't quite believe he's not, if that makes sense. So,
Yeah, it does. Yeah, but in a strange way, it really does. The you're right. I like to say, I was terrified of the boogeyman when I was a kid. I have no evidence. There is to this day, no one has shown me the head of the boogeyman. That kind of like Bigfoot, the same kind of thing. And yet, it was very real to me, just like you said. Have we? So many people been talking about it and saying they believed it and saying it caused them to do things that we're creating. We might be bringing it to life. I don't know. I do know. I believe in psychology. I'm a big proponent of psychology, and I would like to see not just one, but a group of psychologists really analyze the entire Slender Man thing. Maybe taking some of the other boogeymen into account as well, but focus on Slenderman because it's today and it's caused serious harm to a number of people.
yeah.
So that I think that might answer the question. It also might help some of the people who are thinking, did Slenderman tell me to do that, or did I really want to do it on my own? Help them decide for themselves what's going on in their heads. Uh, it's we live in interesting times. The I'm not sure they're any better or worse than when all we had to deal with was the boogeyman under the bed. But
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely
yeah,
right. Like you say, it is interesting. I do find it fascinating. And I think it's only a legend that could have excused me, within the parameters of the internet world that we live in. I don't think this legend spreads nearly as far as fast without the internet. So, yeah, I'd
yeah,
love to see a psychological study of this, of all of that. Was the
yeah.
internet to blame? What is the power of belief, and how far does it go? I agree with you. I think it would be a fascinating study, actually.
Oh, definitely, definitely. Speaking of fascinating stories, you've got another one for us that fits into the theme of unusual things that people are doing.
Oh yeah,
May or
this
may
is
not be real. May
now
explain
this is a
it.
fascinating one. Actually, it's hard to make light of this really, but it is fascinating. It's intriguing. It involves a woman who went missing 25 years ago, in December 2001. 38-year-old Michelle Hundley Smith, she was called. She went shopping to a mall. Obviously, she was in Rockingham County, and that's where she was last seen. Nobody heard from her, her family, nothing. She just disappeared. Then in February, literally a few days ago from where we're recording this, she turns up. She's turned up to the police. They know where she is. She's been missing. She's alive and well. However, she doesn't want her family or anybody else to know where she is. She's literally basically saying she's disappeared. She disappeared of her own accord, and she doesn't want to be found. She just wants her family to know she's alive and well. Now, her daughter, Amanda Smith, she was saying that at the time of the investigation, when her mother first went missing, she was saying that there seemed to be like a lack of desire on the police department in the area to investigate her mum's disappearance. Specifically, she said an expanse of woodland in between the home where she was last seen and the shopping centre where she was going. Now, she wasn't necessarily saying that the police were in on it, but she was basically, insinuating that there was a lack of interest. They didn't, conduct the investigation as they should have done. However, I started to think about this, and okay, admittedly, this was 25 years ago, but if this was today, considering that we all leave a digital fingerprint everywhere we go, there's cameras everywhere, everything, every transaction's electrical almost. So unless you've got some kind of assistance, or unless you just literally disappear into the middle of nowhere and you've got things that you need all around you, you don't need money, blah, blah, blah. I don't know if anyone could actually pull off a Reggie Perrin. And just to explain who Reggie Perrin is, if you're not from the UK, back in the 70s, and this was before my time, I saw reruns in the 80s, there was a show called The Fall and Rise of Reginald Perrin. And what it revolved around, well, it was a comedy, it was a half-hour show every week, and it revolved around a guy who had basically he'd had enough of the modern world, so he faked his own death. He just walked out into the sea, disappeared, and then he came back and he opened a second-hand shop or something, and it just followed him. But the notion of somebody just killing themselves, but not for real, faking their own death, and then just so they can escape the pressures of life. I'm not sure if you recall, around the same time as this lady who had disappeared, this was in England, but it made international news. A guy did the same thing. He took a canoe out on the sea and disappeared. Except he didn't disappear. He went around the coast, turned up back at his house and hid in his loft for X amount of time while his wife collected the insurance money, and they obviously lived off that. The only reason they caught the guy is because he was daft enough to allow himself to be photographed for some housing estate development in South America. So the authorities saw that and they said, "Oh no, in you come," and they got him. So
Ah,
yeah, I mean, I'm just thinking, one, why did this woman actually want to disappear in the first place? It's because you would think disappearing, especially in the 21st century, is a lot harder than just saying, "Look, I've had enough. I want out of this, whatever this is, and I'm moving here. Don't, leave me alone." Um, and so yeah, I'm thinking, how could somebody do that in today's day and age where there's so much um lack of privacy, I guess you would say. And maybe that's
yeah.
a good thing. I don't know, but I don't know if you've heard of this. So have you got any other examples of people who've disappeared of their own accord and just not come back?
Yeah. There was just a news item today about a lady who disappeared, I think 20 years ago, and but left her family, completely disappeared, showed up 20 years later, and she explained that the reason why she did it was because she had substance abuse issues, and she felt she couldn't take care of her family. Uh, and I don't remember that. I should have read it closer. Remember the details of how she stayed hidden for 20 years. That's the key there, right there, that you're talking about, Marcus, because I agree with you. We leave our fingerprints everywhere. And there's so many ways that people can find us, that to be able to go off the grid, and we talk about that a lot in the United States, where people go up to Idaho or one of the remote North Dakota and live in the woods, but they still have contacts of sorts. And if the authorities worked hard enough, they would be able to find these people. The witness protection program is designed to protect people who, squealed on the mob or testified against someone. We have found that it doesn't do a very good job of protecting people, because those people are found as well, and sometimes they're found because they were murdered by people who knew who they were. So that's a fascinating subject that deserves more attention. The show 24 was the one that I think of whenever I think of that, because that was their control room had access to cameras everywhere, and they were able to keep track of the criminals and the good guys and everybody in between. It's a sign of our times that we can no longer escape. We can no longer hide. The kids can't play hide and seek anymore because there's no place to hide.
No, you're probably right there, Paul. Actually,
Yeah. So interesting story. Interesting story. I'm sure there are tons of those kinds of disappearance stories that would be a good study as well. Good study.
Well, as soon as you mention it, actually, it is a good one from the past, and this really is a good one. It's very similar, but back in 91, so again, similar time frame, we're talking about 30, 35 years ago, there was a chap called Căsil Gorgas, and he was from Bacău in Romania. Now, one morning, he's a typical family guy, married, kids. One morning, he went to a cattle trade market. Okay, he was there. He's done this before as part of his business. He owns a farm. He said he'd be there for about 2 or 3 days, and then he'd return home. Several days later, though, still not arrived. His family's not done this before. It's completely out of character. So his family reports him missing. There's an intense search of the areas, intense search of the route, intense search of the cattle market, trade market, and speaking to people who were there. Now, there's just no sign of him. No sign of him whatsoever. As if he's just completely vanished into thin air. Then, on August 29th, 2012, let me check that. Yep, a strange car pulls up outside the Gorgas home. No one sees the driver. Gorgas himself gets out. He's obviously now almost 90. So he looks visibly aged, and the car drives away. However, he's still dressed in the exact same clothes that he went missing in. He's still got his train ticket in his pocket that's been unused, the return journey. The family are obviously happy to see him, but they're completely shocked and they've had no idea where he's been. He doesn't know where he's been. He says he can remember everything up until him leaving home that day in 1991. Everything after that is a complete blank. There's nothing. And then next thing he knows, he's arriving home and it's 2012. Now, as you can imagine, the internet went wild with this. News stations, media stations, there was a lot of investigation into this, a lot of research. People wanted to know more. But ultimately, to the best of my knowledge at least, none of his memory has actually returned. Bits have, but nothing to do with where he's actually been. And there's been theories saying, well, the guy obviously had a second wife or a completely second life somewhere, and he decided to go with them. And then for whatever reason, he returned, or he was returned. Maybe he was suffering from dementia. Other people have said that, if you are suffering from dementia, there are cases of people upping and leaving and just starting a new life somewhere else, and they don't really realize they're doing it or why they're doing it. But that doesn't seem to be the case here. And of course, there's paranormal explanations. The usual, was he abducted by aliens? Well, that's a hell of an abduction, 30 years. Possibly he went through a portal. Again, unlikely, but we should consider it. But yeah, just the fact that you can disappear for 30 years and then turn up wearing the exact same clothes. I mean, if he's just pulling a fast one, and just refusing to say where he's been, then good, good for him in a sense that he can stick to that, because I just think it just fascinates me. Is it just a case of this guy has had a mental episode? But if that's the case, where's he been living for 30 years? Who's been looking after him? Where's he
Yeah.
got his money? All these things. So, yeah, it's another example, one from the past. But I mean, this one is even more mysterious because at least the
Yeah.
lady offered that I just want to disappear. Don't look for me. This guy, nothing. He just turns up and acts like everything's. So I don't know what your thoughts are on that, Paul, but it
Wow.
still fascinates me. This.
Yeah, the first thing I was thinking is, how I like to say, bring some evidence back with you that you went to the future or you came from the future. This guy had evidence. He had the clothes that he was wearing when he disappeared. Now, think about that. 30 years later, he still fit in them, it sounds like.
Yeah.
So, which is a feat in and of itself. Uh, where did he go? Did they do any kind of hypnosis or reverse psychology or anything like that to see if they could tap into that, to get past that wall that's
Mm.
preventing him from remembering all of that. The Yeah, all the other stuff, the portals in the other dimension and being abducted. Why would aliens abduct someone for 30 years? Like, if you can't
Absolutely.
find anything out in a few hours, you just flew here from light years away. You ought to be able to figure something out. But that leaves us with, so what happened? Wow. And I don't have any wild or even somewhat logical ideas for what it might be, other than something new in that mind of ours that we may not be aware of, that happened to trigger in this particular gentleman and caused that to happen. But no one saw him. No one could remember seeing him for 30 years anywhere. I'm at a loss. I'm at a loss. I agree with you. That's still an interesting story.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, right down to the fact that nobody got the number plate of the car that dropped him off. Why did they drop him off? Who were they?
Yeah.
It's one that just continues to fascinate people. And again, we've said it a lot. We could do more research in this. Um,
Yeah.
but I mean, another thing we could do with some research on, though, Paul, is our last story, stones falling from the sky. I mean, this is interesting. So tell me about this. Tell us about this, Paul.
Okay. So this is both a current story and one that triggered some thoughts about someone very famous, at least to us, from the past that many people may not be aware of. The story comes from Zimbabwe, but multiple media sources reported on it. Occupants of a house in Mesvingo, Zimbabwe, they had to evacuate because there were stones falling from the sky and they couldn't determine where they were coming from. Um, it happened for a week. It happened every day, both night and day. The stones were falling and they couldn't determine what it was. Uh, they couldn't find a source. So in that part of the world, they called in a spiritual leader to see if he could determine what it was, and he blamed it on dark spiritual forces. Okay, well that's pretty nebulous. The But he also offered to do an exorcism, and that would remove it. So he's a good businessman as well as a spiritual leader. They couldn't afford, or for some reason they didn't take him up on the offer of the exorcism, but they couldn't stand it, and no one else could explain it. So they finally moved out. And they said that while they were moving out, the stones continued to fall. Um, so you know, kind of like the guy who disappeared. I would get a really strong umbrella and run outside and see if I could find something, or call my neighbors and ask them what's causing this to happen. But they called the landlord, and the landlord said that it was she thinks that it was her nephew who used to live next door, and that he was trying to scare them because he was mad at his aunt for making him move out because he was causing trouble. But as many of our stories today, no one saw him do it. So no one saw the nephew around when the stones were falling. No one seemed to see anything else that might have been causing them to fall. So in our business, Marcus, you know this as well as I do, that things falling from the sky that aren't rain or snow or hail are called a Fortean phenomena. And we all in the paranormal world, we all know what that means. It's something having to do with a gentleman by the name of Charles Fort, who back in the 1800s did probably the first in-depth research on strange anomalies from around the world. So I thought it'd be good for any of our listeners who are not aware of Charles Fort. You know, we're big fans of him. I think I would be the best way to describe it. In 1919, he came out with the Book of the Damned, which is a strange title for basically a collection. He would go to libraries and he would go to newspaper uh, uh, collections and go through them meticulously, looking for these strange stories of spontaneous combustion. That was one. He brought spontaneous combustion up to the forefront. Ball lightning. I didn't know this, but he was the first person to refer to that phenomenon as ball lightning, and let us know that it happens in many places around the world. Uh, Unaccountable noises, ghost stories, the unexplained explosions, loud booms, that we still talk about today, levitation, UFOs. He talked about UFOs, unexplained disappearances. There's sections in the Book of the Damned about disappearances that he encountered. What we call I know in England you call them alien big cats, animals that don't belong here, and yet they're here and we can't explain why. Charles Fort was one of the first people to bring those to the public knowledge. Um, and then, of course, things falling from the sky. Probably one of the things he's most well known for because it's a phenomenon that still happens today, obviously, as we talked about in Zimbabwe. So that when people think of Charles Fort, that's the Fortean phenomena that most um, the one they most think of. So they brought the local authorities into Zimbabwe to this village, and believe it or not, after their investigation, they could not rule either way. They couldn't rule that it was some a Fortean phenomena. They couldn't rule that it was caused by an angry person throwing rocks at this particular family, which I thought was interesting. They should be able to resolve it. So the some of the strange things that Fort talked about, the frogs falling from that's the big one everybody remembers. But
Yeah.
people have seen frogs falling from the sky. The Bible gave frogs falling from the sky a bad name because it was one of the plagues.
Yeah.
It's not so bad if you and then fish falling from the sky. I remember doing a story about these people in the Honduras. There's a village in the Honduras that has a fish rain every year. Happens every summer, like almost on the same weekend. They call it Lluvia de Peces, and they have a festival because they know it's going to be happening, and they eat the fish. So it's not a bad thing; it's a good thing.
Yeah.
So fish falling from the sky has been recorded recently in Texas. I have friends who talked about it in Texas, in Sri Lanka, in Australia. The general explanation, and Foyt didn't really give explanations. He just brought the anomalies to the attention of the public. Those that want to be logical. The fish falls and the animal falls are caused by tornadoes or whirlpool that suck the animals up into the sky and transport them to a couple miles away and drop them. Investigators, the one thing, skeptics of that theory, and I like this, point out that if a tornado sucks all of the animals out of a lake, why is it that it's generally just one species that these people report? Only frogs falling. In Honduras, it's only one kind of fish that they fall. Does it just find a school and suck them up? That's tornadoes aren't that smart. There's also it's so a lot of times it's blamed on flooding, where because of an excessive rainfall, a wall may be breached or something like that, and a school of animals gets transported to another location. So that's why it happens. Insects and spiders, that's another big one. Oh my God, where did they come from? A locust in particular, or spiders. There was an interesting story recently about spiders. Where did they come from? They would see clouds of them moving across the sky, and scientists investigated it, and it's a particular spider that spins a little parachute web, and that's how they move from one location to another to start new, villages of spiders. So
Wow.
they were able to explain that one. But my favorite Fortean story, and this one comes directly from Charles Fort from the Book of the Damned, the Kentucky meat shower of 1876. I mean, this is so great. So this farmer's wife goes outside and she sees meat falling from the sky. She said it was snowing meat.
Mhm.
She's not the only witness. Other people saw the meat falling from the sky, and the investigators said it was definitely meat because it's by the time they got there, it smelled like rotten meat.
Wow.
Uh, the pieces of meat, they measured them. They were 2 by 2 inches, so they were all about the same size. It appeared to be beef, but believe it or not, two men tasted it, which is pretty brave of them, and they said that it tasted more like lamb or possibly deer. So it was not. They didn't think it was beef. Um, One scientist who investigated it said it was a form of bacteria, which I didn't quite understand. It somehow coagulated into something that looked like beef. Um, the other test showed that it was lung tissue from either a horse or a human infant. Now that's a wide range of where the tissue could be from, and how lung tissue from a human infant got into space to fall on this in Kentucky. The So Charles Fort said the one thing he did say that there was no rain that day, so they could not blame it on a tornado sucking up a bunch of cows and butchering them while they're spinning around and having the meat fall that way. So finally, the locals, they had to have an explanation. So they came up with this one, that the meat was brought over them by vultures who vomited meat that they had been eating onto all of this one particular town. They vomited up the meat. Black turkey vultures, which are common in Kentucky. They're also common in Ohio. And Charles Fort liked that one. That was if he had to pick one, that was the explanation he liked the best. And so I wanted to share that one with you, bring everybody up to date on who Charles Fort is. But some examples of Fortean phenomena, especially my favorite, the meat rain in Kentucky. And I have decided, Marcus, that if you and I ever start a band, the name of it's going to be Vulture Vomit. That's it. So
Yeah, I like that. I like a bit of alliteration. It's the first thing I want to say is if it ever rains steak or pork chops out the sky over my house, I'm here for it. I'm here for it, and I'll be getting some buckets, and I'll eat that. But yeah, I mean, it's fascinating because we were speaking about things falling from the sky like fish, frogs, all that kind of thing. And I'll be honest, I've always kind of fallen back on it's a tornado's picked them up and then wherever it's released them. And that's always seemed really logical to me. But I've actually never actually thought, well, how come it's only frogs? How come it's only certain breeds of fish? I've never
yeah.
actually thought that. And that to me it's a massive question, a massive sticking point. Going back to
Yeah.
your story in Zimbabwe, though, the notion that it's the neighbor, and I believe it's a youngster doing this. I mean, if she's saying it's falling night and day, he's got an hell of a supply of rocks that is leashing down on her. Not to mention if he's a youngster. I mean, if these are
Right.
causing such noise, he must have got some bloody big muscles as well. So, yeah, I mean, I don't buy that. I can't tell you what it would be. I know you'll have heard of Rendlesham Forest, obviously, with the Rendlesham UFO. See, down in the south of England. I've got a good friend there, and he's who investigates there, should I say? And he was there one day, and it happened to him. He said they were trying to do some kind of communication, like people use the God helmet and stuff like that. They were trying to communicate with whoever, and it's all of a sudden rocks coming down, out of nowhere. They couldn't see where they
Wow.
were coming down from. They didn't belong there. So it's not like they'd been picked up from that region and dropped. And there's lots of UFO cases where rocks fall from there, although these do seem to be something that the object has picked up in its, exhaust or whatever, and then dropped them again. But yeah, I just could not offer anything aside from something like an apport or something like that, where it's just literally come out of thin air. But I
Mhm.
mean, if that was the case, why? Why on this woman's property? The only thing you'd fall back on, it, and again, I don't believe it myself, but you'd be falling back on things like magic and curses and incantations and stuff. But it's obviously very real, unless
Yes.
unless the woman in question is looking to just get out of the house somehow and she's trying to come up with these. I don't know. But yeah, I don't think it's a young lad chucking all those rocks. But I don't know what it is. I couldn't offer up an explanation, Paul, to be honest.
Exactly, exactly. I agree. That's the one that stumped me as well. Why is it always one species? And
Mm,
again, the flooding is a partial explanation for some of them, but not all of them were the result of flooding. Also, a lot of times they happen overnight, so there's not always witnesses to see exactly what it was. But if it's rain, you can hear rain falling on
yeah,
the roof. And again, and I agree with you on the stones. The news, this is typical of news stories from Zimbabwe. That they didn't say how big the stones were, so they could have been pebbles, and he
right.
could have had a big sack of pebbles. I don't think they were boulders. Um,
Okay.
but but the fact that the police left it open
Yeah.
bothered me as well. That was another one that bothered me. So bottom line is, I want to salute Charles Ford, because he really laid the groundwork by doing these studies before we came around, long before we came around, and opening up the world to these strange and unusual things that we may now call paranormal or anomalies or whatever they are.
Mhm.
Nobody talked about him that much before Charles Ford. So, and his book is still for sale and it's still selling well. How about that?
Yeah.
That longevity there.
No, I think that is an absolutely perfect place to leave that. Like you say, if it wasn't for thought, we wouldn't have people like Keel. We wouldn't be here. A lot of this
That's
stuff
right.
wouldn't be have been lost to history by now. So yeah, get your hands on that book. That's for sure. Paul, it's been another great, fascinating, thought-provoking episode. Look, thank you very much for all your info. Thanks for your input. It's been fascinating.
Yes, thank you. I feel the same. I learn more in an hour than I have in weeks. Here, so it's always good. I hope everybody else out there feels the same way. Fascinating, educational, and fun.
Absolutely, absolutely. Second that, as always, and as always, I'd like to thank you guys for joining us. It's the usual call. Tell all your friends, subscribe to our channel, check out Me Time for the Mind, check out Paul's stuff on Substack, and make sure you join us next week and beyond for more fascinating episodes. Until next time, goodbye and take care.